So, yeah, I wrote this a couple months ago. I did an voiceover recording, but I think I need the face-to-face. I want the face-to-face. In the course of editing this video, so much has happened that the longer it takes me to edit the video, the more out of date and obsolete anything I have said has become. So we're gonna just post through it, all right? I'm going to cut to the stuff that I've already done, and that's gonna take you through for a few minutes, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm going to do my talking head shit. And hi, it's good to see you. It's good to see me. What the hell? I'm not a lawyer or a legislator. I'm just a person with pattern recognition skills and a family history that has me primed to pay attention. With that said, let's get doomy. At a family gathering in Boston recently, my cousins asked how I was and how my partner and I are doing in Texas. I replied that we were trying to figure out how to leave, and when asked why, since there was never a social situation I didn't make more awkward, I said it was because our governor is a Christo-fascist. There was the inevitable pause of nonplussedness, and I added that no, that was not hyperbole, however much I wished it to be so. I have often joked that Texas's government is headed up by a triumvirate of evil. Greg Abbott as the governor, Dan Patrick as his lieutenant governor, and Ken Paxton, the state attorney general. Let's start with him. Ken Paxton is the sort of guy who'll ask why you weren't at church on Sunday, but then spend his entire tenure as state attorney general under indictment on securities fraud charges. He's also opened an investigation of Dell Children's Hospital, a world-renowned medical facility, because they provided gender-affirming care to kids, but not, as the TERF squad would have you believe, any kind of major surgical intervention, because that's not how this shit works. Dan Patrick is a walking 700 Club Wikipedia entry whose sole saving grace seems to be his strong belief in statutory rape laws. He caught ire by tweeting this the day after the 2016 shooting in Orlando at the Pulse nightclub. He said it was a pre-scheduled tweet, but you can cancel scheduled tweets. That's a thing you could do. And lastly, Governor Abbott. Everything you need to know about this man can be summed up thusly. In 1984, at the age of 26, a tree branch fell on him while he was out jogging, which left him permanently paralyzed below the waist. He sued the homeowner and a tree service company, resulting in an insurance settlement that provided him with lump sum payments every 3 years until 2022, along with monthly payments for life. As of August 2013, the monthly payment was $14,000 US, and the 3-year lump sum payment was $400,000 US, all tax-free. Years later, Abbott backed legislation in Texas to limit, quote, putative damages stemming from non-economic losses and, quote, non-economic damages in medical malpractice cases. While the settlement in his own paralysis case was, quote, a non-medical liability lawsuit which remains uncapped, Abbott has faced criticism, generally from Democrats who oppose the Republican-backed lawsuit curbs, for, quote, tilting the judicial scales towards civil defendants. None of this information goes into the stances these men have on things like reproductive rights, queer rights, women's rights, immigrant rights, etc. But don't worry, they're awful. So after the 2022 midterms, it feels like people with these kinds of bullet points in their Wikipedia pages have a lot of power, although thankfully less power than they could have gotten. So thank you to everyone who voted and helped stem the tide. They got less power than they could have, thankfully, but they're using it to predictably awful ends. Or trying to, anyway. This recent video from Some Norviews, it was recent when I wrote this, it goes into the ways they're embarrassing themselves. in the process of trying to, make us Gilead or whatever, whatever shitty analogy you want to use. It would be a balm to all of this madness, except state legislatures are still managing to pass some really concerning shit. Now, the nice thing is that a lot of the concerning shit keeps getting struck down by the courts, which is cool. Yeah, after that very long wind-up is what I want to talk to you about today. In my last video, I mentioned how, at the time of recording, 3 new anti-trans bills were being put forward. Since then, Tennessee's drag ban has been signed into law, but then also, see, this is what I mean. Things have been moving so fast that the stuff that I wrote is already not true, because the Tennessee drag ban was also deemed unconstitutional. That law effectively made it illegal for any transgender or gender nonconforming person to just stand up and give a talk. So any kind of public speaking, if you wrote a book, if you are performing in a play, if you are attending a professional conference and you're on a panel, if you are transgender or gender nonconforming, they really want to make that not legal to do. And that's bad. Also in my last video, I mentioned the Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft and how its closure and destruction was one of the first actions a specific German political party took. They destroyed years and years of research and data and destroyed countless lives. And they set up the situation where regular yet to be radicalized Germans were like, oh shit, you can just do that? You can just say people are undesirables and disappear them? Interesting. And so in doing so, shoved the Overton window so far over that the rhetoric became so common that the concepts of exterminating and eradicating whole communities sounded appealing instead of terrifying. A major problem our current culture has is that any comparison to fascism or Nazis, it gets immediately dismissed as hyperbole. Anything you don't like is Nazis. And it's like, no, there are plenty of people who do that. In this case, I and plenty of other people are trying to point out specific historical patterns that we see. And by naming those outcomes, we're hoping to prevent them. That whole, never forget, never again stuff. That's what this is. Boy, we're failing that, because in 2015 and 2016, I had other members of the Jewish community telling me I was insulting the Shoah and insulting the memory of the Shoah by saying that Trump's rhetoric and the rhetoric of most of the 2016 GOP candidates reminded me of late 1920s German rhetoric. It was like the concept, again, of never forget was reserved solely for remembering those lost and not trying to prevent another genocide. Or worse, never forget only applied to, say, the Ashkenazi Jewish community and, no one else. What's the saying? Injustice anywhere is a danger to justice everywhere. You can't say never again for us, but then when it starts to happen somewhere else, be like, I don't see it. You can't do that. You just can't fucking do that. So right now we've got a Democratic majority Senate, a Republican majority Congress, a Supreme Court weighted towards extreme political and religious conservatism, put a pin in that. State legislatures are using their session time to debate the humanity of queer people and probably others, but not trying to fix their actual issues. And the 2024 election machine getting ready to go brrr. As an aside, Greg Abbott, to bring him up again, has not done a thing about ERCOT and the catastrophe they caused in February of 2021. But he's taken the time to hamstring librarians and educators and make pregnancy and parenthood even riskier propositions than they already were. And who needs working power grids or maintain roads when you can keep the queers out and the fetuses in? I am recording this. It is 102 outside. I can't have the fan on. It's getting warm in here. In 2016, when North Carolina proposed a ban on transgender people using the bathroom that aligns with their identity, 68 companies teamed up with the Human Rights Campaign to sue. According to this piece from Vox, filing together with the Human Rights Campaign, the amicus brief argues that the law condones individuous discrimination and damages the undersigned company's ability to recruit and retain a diverse workforce. And here's the 68 companies who signed on that. And I've got to say, I didn't expect places like Replacements Limited, several major banks, and several major insurance companies to get involved in this way. I am literally begging for companies to bring this energy back. It's patently absurd that only 7 years ago, transgender people were worth companies sticking their necks out over a bathroom ban, but it's pretty radio silent now that gender-affirming care is being attacked. Like I said, I wrote this months ago. At this point, the whole thing with Bud Light and Target pulling some of their Pride collection items, all of this is sort of like terrifying, actually. Googling with the search term, companies pushing back on anti-transgender legislation yielded no similar pieces. And that's terrifying. Like I said, still, I should have read this over before I went and tried to read this. And every year in the run-up to Pride, we're treated to the extremely online members of the queer community sneering at rainbow capitalism. And look, I don't love extruded Pride product brought to you by Wells Fargo, Bud Light, and Geico either. But if the day comes where it's better financially or culturally for companies to drop their support, that's a very dead canary in a catastrophically unventilated coal mine. I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people and all that, but a lot of the cishet folks who are just joining the chat are showing up with all of the just asking questions rhetoric sort of already muddying the waters. They're not talking to the trans and non-binary people they know, if they even know them, before believing the New York Times and the Atlantic when they run deeply misinformed pieces about trans healthcare and legislation. They're showing up believing that kids are being given major surgery with barely any consultation or parental guidance. Actually, they don't even care if there's parental involvement, because parental involvement and parents being gender affirming is being spun as abusive permissiveness, and as bad as if there was no parental consent at all. There's no asking actual trans people or their families about psychotherapy or puberty blockers or any of that. They're reading reports by people with no lived experience and giving voices to people who are coming to this conversation with the worst faith possible. Am I coming to it with an agenda? Yeah. My agenda is that I want trans kids to have happy, joyful, affirmed childhoods, and for trans adults to have safe and fulfilling lives. And for those trans kids to grow up into trans adults with happy and fulfilling lives. If that makes me biased, so be it. I just know my life would be different if I had known non-binary was a term when I was a kid. Because when I was in 5th grade, my two personal heroes were Hatshepsut the Pharaoh and Alana of Trabant. Currently, there's a lot of discourse around people getting the hell out of places like Texas, Florida, Missouri, etc. And people born in those places are very justifiably pushing back on the just leave narrative, but also like, I'm here to make this video because my grandparents got the hell out of Minsk in the early 1920s. I'm literally here to have these worries and be scared because my booby and Zadie had enough of the state-sanctioned danger they were in. And the thing about Texas is that when people like Abbott and Paxton push their rhetoric, I have to genuinely ask how long it will be before people start bringing that back. Like civilians doing it. Wait. Never mind. Not all of those were Texas, but like that should only make it more worrying. Not that my rhetoric was, inaccurate in some way. I'm not sure what happens next. I do know I'm dreading what rulings will come down from the SCOTUS in June. Aha! Yeah, I wrote this a while ago. Oh, right, the SCOTUS that we put a pin in, by the way. Boy, am I excited for the precedents about to be set by a government body filled with people who get lifetime appointments without any kind of real oversight, whose makeup is currently weighted towards originalists who are so conservative. An obscure 18th century ruling was used to defend the overturning of Roe versus Wade by people so clearly in the pockets of not just the wealthy and the powerful, but also extreme right-wing conspiracists who want to roll the Constitution back by at least 100 years. Thomas, Alito, Comey Barrett, and Kavanaugh all deeply put their politics, their personal beliefs, before anything else. All have worrying social ties. Even Gorsuch, who was sold as the good one, just got exposed for a conflict of interest. Hey, remember when that happened? Because that was a while ago and has been kind of overshadowed by everything else. Look, when Roberts is the reasonable conservative on the Supreme Court, we have a serious problem. I have a soft glimmer of hope that all of the high-profile strikes that are happening or are about to happen in the US happen to spur us into some kind of general strike situation, because that really desperately needs to happen. I don't know about you, but I'm very tired of the leopards eating people's faces party leading the conversation. Just tossing that out there. Boy, yeah. Please buy some stickers. There will be a link in the description. All proceeds from the sales of this sticker will go to Lambda Legal and the Trans Justice Funding Project. Please help me support those wonderful causes, because, oh boy, it'd be cool if you, be a lot cooler if you did. I got the Patreon, I got the Ko-Fi. Please do those things. It'd be cool. Happy Pride? Happy Pride? Yeah, I got nothing. Hello?